Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. The next hour is all about the entrepreneur, why they start businesses, how they make their businesses grow, how they overcome failures and achieve success. Your hosts are Bob Gibbons, founder of Riata Commercial Realty, a commercial real estate advisory and tenant advocacy firm, and Stephen Nooner, founder and CEO of Alkali, a company with a unique process that helps businesses more effectively buy and manage their insurance programs. Bob and Stephen will ask probing questions to find impactful solutions that will help take your business to the next level. And now, here's Bob Gibbons and Stephen Nooner.
Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. This is Bob Gibbons.
And I'm Stephen Nooner, and we're here with another great guest. Tommy Swanson is here with us. He's the CEO and founder of Stripes. Stripes is a social advertising agency in Dallas, Texas. They write things, design stuff, create films, buy ads, and think up strategies that produce measurable outcomes for their clients. They moved the needle for some of the largest, most respected organizations in the world. Tommy's a serial entrepreneur. He's got a cool story. I'm really excited to have him share kind of his wisdom and learnings. And he's much, much older than Bob. I'm just kidding.
No.
Young guy, but has covered millions of miles already, and we're excited. If you want to learn more about Tommy or Stripes, please visit stripesagency.com. Welcome.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Glad you're here. On that age thing, thank you for pointing that out, Stephen. I'm actually more than double his age. But you know what? You can learn from everybody, can't you? Right. I sure can. Right. I have a long way to go. Well, we always like to start off with what we call wisdom of the others, and we're going to use a quote you provided for us, Tommy. And you said you weren't sure who said it, but you think it may have been Viktor Frankl, an Austrian neurologist and Holocaust survivor. Really great man that was. And your quote was, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response." What is it about that quote that grabs you?
I think especially in advertising specifically, there's it's pretty notorious for having like a toxic culture where you can almost start to view the client as an enemy to a certain extent. And I think what it really highlights is like in that moment is your opportunity to choose, and that there's an opportunity to look at situations, challenges as opportunities, and not always view the client as the enemy. That
right.
When your client has a bad idea, it's probably their boss's 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 bad idea. And that as I think someone who's serving in a client service industry, like having just a tremendous amount of empathy is really important. So that's kind of the thought process behind that.
So does that happen a lot? I mean, I want to divert to your thought, but does that happen a lot, I guess? So you get like these wild ideas from the visionary, I guess, and someone delivers you that we want to execute on it. And it's just not an ROI move?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of that. But I think on the flip side, the perspective that I try to approach it with is like, rather than just assuming that because you have a perspective and theirs isn't yours, like they come from an area of understanding their customer and their business and the intricacies of their internal operations. And so like my creative team would hate me saying this, but like agencies to a certain extent are about compromise, like us putting forth an idea, but also like listening and understanding that the client has a position that comes from somewhere, and that somewhere could be an area that you don't understand. So
yeah. Well, the other thing I liked about the quote is that it gives people a real sense of responsibility.
Totally.
And control, because there's all kinds of stimulus out there, whether it's from an individual, from an organization, from an event. Some guy's flipping you off as you're driving by in the car, cutting you off. Yeah, and it's Stephen Nooner flipping me off. It doesn't even require a car now that I think about it. But anyway.
As I blow by you in my Prius.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, I'm responsible for myself and my attitude and
sure.
the way I respond to things, not that other person.
Yep.
And so I really like that, and especially for somebody like Viktor Frankl, if in fact he's the one that said this. I mean, to have gone through the Holocaust, and wasn't he the same guy that really observed how different people that went through those concentration camps, some died and some didn't, and it all turned out to be how they responded to
Absolutely.
the events and
Yep.
the circumstances they found themselves in
Yep.
that determined that. Fascinating.
Heavy stuff, man.
It is. Oh, I mean, it's fascinating stuff, and we could have a psychologist and psychiatrist and all kinds
They
of
would
other
just
people.
confuse it because that's just beautiful elegance right there. And
They take the fun out of it.
yeah,
Right?
we put a PhD on it, and we would come. We wouldn't even know what we just learned.
All right, so Tommy, this is not your first rodeo.
Yeah.
Stripes Agency is like number 3 or 4 or some absolutely depressing number for a 26-year-old kid. So tell us, where'd you start?
I mean, I've had the bug since being a kid. Did all the things that a young teenage entrepreneur does. Had the lawn care company and doing jobs here and there, but really figured out early on, like, the internet provides a great opportunity. And so I would, like, go to garage sales on the weekend, try to find stuff that I could flip on eBay, try to sell it all that weekend so that I'd have enough money to go buy more stuff the next weekend.
What were you
Eventually-
selling? What kind of stuff were you
all
finding?
sorts of things. And eventually I would get enough money to get a smartphone, right, as they were kind of coming out, and I'd sit there at garage sales, like, looking up how much does this sell for,
Oh wow!
and try to create a little business off of it. But when I was 15, really started to get into marketing, and web hosting was an industry that was just interesting to me. And so I met 2 twin brothers who were my age online, who lived in the UK, and they were just genius kids who loved tech and loved computers. And
What's the name of that chat room where these
I think it was
young
called Digital Point at the time. I don't even know if it exists anymore.
That's
but
hilarious.
yeah, but I was kind of in charge of the marketing, and they were in charge of the actual tech and ops. And I think it was a lot of, like, our ignorance in business of we didn't look at the margins that we probably were supposed to, and just served customers in a really great way. And so there was a lot of referrals, and it kind of took off in 9 months, and sold it and did it again and sold it. And so, yeah, it was a blast.
And you never met these guys face to face?
I met them after we sold the first company because we had enough money to actually travel to go meet. Yeah.
What? There's just beauty in that. I mean,
Yeah.
for me to be partners with Nooner and never have to see his face, what a joy that would be.
Hey, I'm working on it. Studio, I'll be calling in from my bathroom.
Wow.
So I mean, I'm curious. Your parents, right? So what are they like? Well, I don't know what I'm thinking of my kids starting businesses, online chat room with
Yeah.
people they've never met. So like, where are they at in all this, and what are they saying?
'Cause it's really a 300-pound Russian guy that you're in business with. You just don't know it.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was because they were really strategic or if it was because I was the last child, but
Oh,
they
yeah.
were pretty hands off. And
You're number
so,
what?
number 3.
Okay.
Yep. And yeah, so they let me make mistakes and let me learn from that. But then also, when kind of opportunities were moving, they were good counsel. My dad worked in business and banking, and so he could provide some good consult, but really just kind of let me live and learn. And
But you're going to school full-time in high school
Sure.
and running this business.
definitely.
How much time did this business take?
So we would run it in the evenings primarily, but I mean, it got to the size where we had a bunch of staff around the country and a few internationally that would kind of run operations during the day, and we'd just jump in during the evenings. But I remember even at night, I would I'd have an alarm set every 30 minutes to wake up to check the servers, make sure they were
All night
live.
long?
All night long.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So it was definitely, advantageous being as young, and I could live through that, but it was a blast.
I think there's a Seinfeld episode about that.
There should have been. So you sell this company, and you're how old when you sell it? Like 16?
16, yeah.
And so you have a big exit, really, for anybody, but especially for somebody 16.
Sure.
What do you do next?
So we really just looked at how could we take that same concept that we just went through and replicate it. So to dive into it a little bit, we would essentially rent servers from a data center. Our provider was actually SoftLayer.
Yeah.
When they had 9 employees.
Oh, wow.
We were working with them. We'd rent these servers, and then we'd kind of slice them up to a certain extent, put in simple terms, and then rent them to others. But we realized that where the real money was if you actually owned the equipment. And so our margins were really low, but we were able to get customers and just make that really small margin there. I remember when we had that realization of if we could just own the equipment, our margins would skyrocket. And so I called Dell at 15 trying to finance the equipment, and it was like $250,000 to $500,000. And I was 15, and they were like, no.
Did they know you were 15?
Yeah, I had to tell them eventually. And so we realized the opportunity was to sell it upstream to someone who did have the equity to actually own the equipment. And so if we could just build up customer bases, we could sell it upstream to someone who actually could create the margin. And so we did it once, and then we were like, well, we can just do it again.
So no non-compete?
No.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's incredible.
So how do you go? I mean, you said you were in charge of marketing. Is that how you, I mean, how'd you, what's the progression from that to Stripes?
Sure. I mean, we realized, I did early on, that just like digital presented a great opportunity. Search was, to a certain extent, the yellow pages. It's a way where someone's expressing intent to purchase, right? Or intent to at least explore something.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there because we got to take a break.
Sure.
Sorry, Bob.
Great. I know you. How did the Earth start? It's 10 seconds. We'll be back on 1190. Hi, this is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty. If your office lease is going to be expiring in the next year or two, the one thing I would tell you definitely do not want to do is exercise a renewal option. Now, that may sound a little nuts when you negotiate for that renewal option. Why wouldn't you actually want to use it? Well, the reason is because while you want to have one as a reservation for your space so the landlord can't lease the space out from under you, that option may not actually work the way you want it to now. It may have made sense 5 years ago, but it doesn't today. The only thing that changes when you exercise a renewal option are the expiration date and the rent. But you may want to do other things like have another option to renew, have an option to terminate or expand. You may want to be able to expand now or have a new base year for your operating expenses. There's all kinds of things that need to be considered. So we recommend that you renegotiate, not renew. For more information, contact me, Bob Gibbons, at texastenantrep.com. That's texastenantrep.com. Welcome back to the next level, conversations that propel business, not prepare business. Propel.
Propel and prepare for propelling?
Something like that. Well, we're here with Tommy Swanson of Stripes Agency, and you can learn more about them at stripesagency.com. So before the break, Stephen asked you this giant question of how does everything you did at 15 and 16 lead into Stripes Agencies, and you had just started telling us about that. So
Sure, yeah. The great thing about digital is there's a whole lot of information that's out there.
Sure.
And so when I realized search and social was going to be a great opportunity to market, it wasn't too hard to learn it. There was a whole internet of things that was out there for me to learn. And so, just read a lot, networked a lot, and then decided to go to school. I went to UT Dallas for a year and just realized like the textbooks were 5 or 10 years behind what was actually
Oh,
happening.
wow.
And so my family's the type that you go to school and then you go get a job. And
Your dad's from the banking background.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's got to be part of it, right?
so, I was freelancing a little bit my freshman year for the Tribune, and at the end of my freshman year, got a job offer and convinced them to let me move to Chicago, and then eventually came back down to work at an agency in marketing, and eventually that kind of spurred me to want to start my own.
So what was it about working at that agency that you can name or not name at your choice, by the way?
Sure.
What was it about working there that said, hey, I told you I don't really want to do this for someone else. I want to do this on my own. Was it because they weren't doing something they should have been doing, that you wanted to do it a different way? You just wanted to be empowered? Well, I mean, what was it?
Sure. Probably a few things. One, I could tell that there's a lot of better businesses to build out in the world than another agency. They're not great margins. They're hard to sell, but I realized that I loved it. The fact that you get to go into a place every day and be faced with a whole host of different businesses and a whole host of different challenges and people makes it so you're never bored. And so I really loved agencies, and I'd always kind of heard this question being asked in the commercial space, which was, what's the ROI on social? And I'd worked in publishing before where the ROI is really simple, right? If I drive more traffic to a piece of content, the ad revenue exists, and it kind of provides a return on your marketing efforts. Then I was working at an agency that primarily served nonprofits. Nonprofits are very focused on, if I give you $1, how many dollars am I getting back? And so when I kept hearing in the commercial space, like, what's the ROI on social? I was like, I don't understand this. Like, I've had to do this for the last 2 jobs. Why isn't it that the commercial space and a lot of businesses are struggling with this? So it seemed like a great opportunity to try to go solve that problem.
And have you solved it? I mean, because to me, when I think of social, it is one of those things. It seems like some people have figured it out, but then it seems like there's a lot of
Just
agencies
building
out there.
awareness.
Yeah.
That's our metric, is building awareness.
What's the awareness on
What
the
does that
ROI?
mean?
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest challenges is that social oftentimes comes out of like a PR and kind of communications department, or even a PR agency where their primary service offering is that of social, right?
Mm-hmm.
We look at it, and I think kind of the broader marketing community is starting to move in this direction, where social provides a great advertising opportunity. And if you think about Facebook and Google, which isn't really social, but they're like performance marketing platforms. There's a reason that Facebook has like a $600 billion market cap, and it's because they can actually drive outcomes through their advertising platform for businesses. And so we take a very media and like advertising oriented approach towards social, where it isn't so much like a PR and comms and customer service type play, but how do we use this platform that people are getting on like sometimes up to 20, 30 times a day?
Oh my gosh.
How can we leverage that inventory to put a message in front of them that actually compels them to take whatever action that we want them to take?
So how do you measure the ROI then?
Sure. Well, it depends on the business and the actual objective, but a lot of our clients were, we work with Stanford University. And so we'll work with their executive education department at the Graduate School of Business. And literally our KPI is, can we drive leads That's it. It's a lead generation play. How much does it cost for us to generate a lead for one of the different programs that they have? And so that's a lead generation play, but you can do it in a whole host of industries. If it's e-commerce, if it's, we're even doing a lot of work in consumer packaged goods right now, where we're literally trying to tie offline sales that are happening at a retailer all the way back to impressions that are served on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. And the data side of that is complex, and there's a lot of hands that it passes through, but it definitely is possible.
So who's your ideal client?
So I think right now there's a big challenge in like brand advertising, so big advertisers and consumer packaged goods, auto, retail, travel, where they've historically just looked at kind of these awareness KPIs, like reach, how many people did I reach, how many impressions did I serve them, and we think there's a real opportunity to go in there and bring a much more performance-oriented mindset of, when I spend $1, how many dollars do I get back? And as we look towards kind of even the future of advertising, I think there's a real opportunity for us to maybe play a role in helping some of those advertisers make that pivot and switch.
So no B2B.
We don't do a whole lot of B2B. I think part of it just comes from a selfish factor of it isn't super fun to work on from a creative perspective.
Yeah.
So we typically try to stick with B2C and consumer brands.
So, circling back, you said it was with the old firm, it was the question, right? In the interest of how do I answer that question? We said there were a couple of things. What else spurred you to start out on your own?
Yeah, having an agency of my own, I knew that I wanted to work in that probably for the rest of my life. And so if that's going to be the case, why not kind of control your own destiny and create the workplace or environment that you want to be in forever? And then I think a lot of agencies typically lean one way or the other. They're a very creative shop that doesn't care a lot about data and strategy, or they're a very data and strategy-oriented shop that doesn't care about story and narrative and design. And so, wanting to create something that had a very balanced approach that realizes that story is what actually drives people to take action, but you have to put it in front of the right person at the right time to actually get them to convert.
So one of the things I thought was interesting, you say that social media or the social media function in a lot of companies is operated by the least paid, least experienced person in the shop. Is that just because it's an afterthought for most agencies?
I think it's that. I think it's also, and I don't think it's done for any very strategic reasons other than young people understand social because they grew up in it. And so we'll hand that to the person who understands it most. The challenge is those people, I'm one of them, right? I'm young, but a lot of young people don't necessarily know how to translate that into a business outcome. And so I think that's the real challenge, is that sure, there are people who can create great content on social and get people to engage with it, but does it actually do anything for the business? And so I think that's the question we have to answer.
What do you do differently that for your team, right, to make that environment not the same as what you came from? How do you attract, how do you keep good people around?
So I think the industry in that of advertising is changing a lot right now, where you have a lot of big advertising agencies, like one here in Dallas and Richards, that they typically serve as an AOR, an agency of record for a big brand, where they serve in a lot of times all capacities, creative, media, digital, and you're starting to see, to a certain extent, a decentralization of that from my perspective, where a lot of brands are looking at how do we either in-house some of that or hire people who are very good at a specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've kind of, over the last couple of years, been able to get a lot of talent from those bigger firms where some of it is just due to the fact that there's a lot of people getting laid off and due to big brands leaving, and them wanting to go to a small agency that does one thing, does it really well, and serves brands in a more kind of agile, nimble capacity than a big AOR like Richards.
Interesting. Okay. Well, we're going to take another break. We'll be back with Tommy Swanson in a minute. You're listening to The Next Level on 1190 AM iHeartRadio.
Stick around.
Hi, my name is Fern, and I've been an empowered team member at Alkali for over 5 years. I first learned about Alkali through an online job board and was intrigued to learn that Alkali was a Dave Ramsey endorsed local provider. But what captivated me was Alkali's mission statement, which is closely aligned with my own beliefs. So what's kept me at Alkali for over 5 years? First, Alkali's 5 core values match my own. Second, I've been empowered to use my unique abilities to impact our community, our clients, and Alkali. If you'd like to learn more about becoming an empowered Alkali team member, visit our website, alkaliservices.com. That's ALKALI services.com.
We're back with Tommy Swanson, CEO of Stripes Agency, stripesagency.com.
So one of the things I was curious about, Tommy, is in the social media platform, you have a lot of content that has to be creative, and some of that are created. Some of that's text, some of that's video, some of that's who knows what, memes, whatever.
Sure.
I mean, do you guys create all of that content?
We do, and a lot of it comes from where I was talking about. We are hiring a lot from bigger ad agencies where they're serving across kind of all mediums and channels. And so they're producing commercial spots, they're producing billboards, big campaigns. And so we have a lot of those capabilities in-house, but there is kind of this unique element of social and digital when it comes to creative. So kind of one of the things we talk about is most agencies approach social and digital kind of through derivative means. They'll take the content that they produce for a billboard or a print piece or television, and they'll try to just like squeeze it into digital, right? Or
Just make it smaller.
Exactly, right? And the challenge is that the way that we consume content and advertising on digital is so dramatically different than how we do through kind of traditional means. So think about a television spot, for example. If it's a 30-second spot, you kind of have the opportunity to create a narrative and an arc, and maybe 20, 25 seconds in, like hit this like emotional peak that inspires you, makes you cry, makes you laugh. You don't have that opportunity on digital. People are clicking skip ad, or if it's in their news feed, they see it for 3 seconds and they keep scrolling. And so we talk about how do we create thumb-stopping creative? How do we get someone to actually like stop and watch the piece of content that we're putting in front of them? So we have to front-load the message as much as possible because most aren't going to get to the 30-second mark. They probably aren't going to get to the 20-second mark.
What do you have any metrics for what is the average time somebody's going to watch?
On Facebook, it's not very long. The average dwell time on a piece of content is literally 1.5 seconds.
Whoa.
And so on video content, it's actually got better in the last year with Facebook. It's probably in the realm of like 10 to 20 seconds. But even in that scenario, trying to think through like what's your 3-second commercial? Like what's the first 3 seconds of your ad that gets them to want to watch the next 27 seconds of your ad? And so there's a lot of just nuance in social and digital when it comes to creative that most people don't think about.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's a quote out there, and I'll butcher it, but I'll just say from my own experience, like the amount of effort it takes to pull something off, give like a 10-minute talk versus a 30-minute talk, it takes a ton more preparation. So when you talk about that amount of time, that blows my mind.
Yeah, you really have to. It's hard because brand managers have typically had the opportunity to communicate a message in a 30-second spot. And so how do you get them to simplify their message into something that you can communicate in 3 or 6?
It differentiates, right? I mean, it's not
Totally.
just like, I mean,
Well, and they're even having to do it on TV because, I mean, with my DVR, guess how many ads I watch?
Right.
So now during the show, they're having to have some little guy, cartoon or whatever, run across the screen or in the corner or, so they're struggling with the same thing.
Definitely.
I would think that the only place where traditional advertising is still working in a traditional way is if you're in a paper magazine or a paper newspaper, which, I mean, again, who gets the newspaper in actual physical paper anymore? I mean, I do on Sunday, not because I want to, because I don't have the option. If I subscribe for the whole week, they throw it. But I never look at it. It just goes to the trash, and I look at it on my computer.
Yep.
you're
Times
so
are changing.
mean, Bob. You're so mean. That paper boy works so hard delivering that
I'm sure he does.
uphill both ways in the snow.
So is there a particular digital platform, social media platform that you find? I know you said, BDC is what you're primarily focused on. Is there one that you find that is more appropriate to certain things than others?
Certainly, especially when you start looking at audience. So if you want a younger demographic, you probably aren't going to buy all of your media on Facebook. You're probably going to lean into...
I know, because guys like me got on Facebook and chased all the kids away.
I will say there is definitely a narrative of there aren't young people on Facebook anymore, and that isn't true. But there definitely is a shift happening towards more on Instagram and Snapchat for sure. But the thing that a lot of people tend to forget is Instagram is owned by Facebook. And so when we buy media through Facebook's platform, the ability to buy it on Instagram is really easy. So
Can we take just a second though? Pontificate. What do you think is driving the trend for the younger people coming off Facebook? Is it that the old guys ruin it with all their hot sports political opinions and stuff? I mean, is it just...
Or that they just don't want to be where their parents are?
I think it's probably that.
Yeah.
In
my kid's case, that was certainly the case.
Sure. Yeah.
Mom and dad are watching, I'm gone.
Yep.
And then, of course, we go open an Instagram. So then they're on Snapchat. What else is coming that we don't know yet? Or at least that I don't know about yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that's something that we have to deal with all the time is try to figure out what's coming up next. I know it's not a new platform, but Snapchat, from the standpoint of how I look at it of advertising, I think their capabilities in the next 12 to 24 months for businesses is going to get a lot better.
Huh.
So.
Do you think that social media is going to go much more niche going forward where, if I want to be talking about sports, I'm going to go to a different platform than Facebook and Instagram? I mean, is it going to get very segmented like that, or do you not really see any trends going that way?
It's a good question. I think the two different paths are that, or that these platforms get really good at creating communities around different topics. So if you look at the deep dark web of Reddit or something like that, where they have different subreddits that are relatable to different types of people and interests that they have, if some of these platforms can figure that out really well, then maybe it can be centralized in a few.
Interesting.
See, Bob, you're spurring the economy. Every time you switch to whatever platform your kids are, you get another $1 billion IPO company that gets developed.
I'm killing some and helping others.
Yeah.
Just chasing them
I
around.
think Zuckerberg's already all right.
All right. So what's the biggest challenge in your industry right now?
I think a few things. One would be, from my perspective, is the comp model is really odd in advertising, which is you're compensated as a percentage of how much money you spend. So if you think about that, you're incented on an expenditure.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully we can move towards a more performance-oriented comp model in the future. And I think that creates a lot of challenges in the industry of we're focusing on the wrong things. And if we did have a more performance-oriented mindset, creative would be a lot more valued than it is, because it's what actually gets people to
perform.
take some action,
Yeah.
right? But right now, when you're incented on how much you spend, it's really media driven. So I think that's one big challenge that we're up against. I think agencies as a whole, brands are bringing a lot in-house. And I think partially due to that a lot of agencies haven't performed and haven't been able to show that when they spend a tremendous amount of money that they're actually showing some return for their client. So those are a couple.
Well, yeah, I can see that. I mean, if I'm going to be buying AdWords, well, I can go on and buy AdWords. So I think I can do it as well as somebody else
Certainly.
who's in an agency without having to spend that money, right?
Yep.
But I can see that people are going to say that, but will they really do it?
Good question.
And so they play around with it. They experiment with one or two things, and it's like, well, that social media doesn't work. But they haven't really done it professionally, properly, all the rest. And so I got to believe you guys bring a whole lot more to the table for that commission, if you will, than somebody that's doing it on their own.
Certainly. And I think the fact that we are really discipline oriented is a strength and a weakness. A strength in that of we do one thing and we do it really well. That when you compare in-house results or just like a big AOR against our performance, it is pretty drastic. The challenge is that I won't do everything else for you. And so when you're limited on time and you don't want to be a quarterback between 10 different agencies, it can make sometimes more sense to hire one shop to do it all for you.
So do you end up being a sub-agency of larger agencies?
It's funny. I, after working at an agency, made kind of this determination day one, we're not going to sub. I think starting to rethink that. There's challenges in working with other agencies that they try to squeeze your margins a lot and that you don't control the client relationship.
Yeah.
And that's really challenging. So there's downsides, but then there's the reality of the industry, and we might long-term need to go in that direction.
Interesting. I can see that being a challenge, because if you're a sub-agency and you don't have control of the client, that also may be that you don't get good direct access to that client, so everything's getting filtered through the agency. So by the time it gets to you, is it really what the client
Harder
wanted
to execute on, right?
Yeah, I got to believe that that's really a tough thing, and therefore, when you're wanting to be compensated on ROI, well, that kind of all goes out the window as a sub.
Right, and they really, for the most part, want you to be a white-labeled service that isn't even visible to the client.
Right.
That they act as.
Aren't we brilliant?
Yeah, and so, it creates a lot of challenges like the ones that you just said. So
you also, in the pre-interview materials, you mentioned that it's really hard to scale a service business. Tell us a little more about that.
So I think one of the big challenges.
I'm sorry. Let's do that after the break. I apologize. You're listening to 1190 AM. We'll be back in a second.
Hi, I'm Alex Frohmeyer. I'm the founder and CEO of Beam Dental, a dental benefits company for small business. And here's a fun fact. Bob and Steven both wear dentures.
We're back with Tommy Swanson, CEO of Stripes Agency. You can find him at stripesagency.com.
And because I wasn't paying attention to the clock, Danny was freaking out in the booth because I was going way over. So I apologize for that, Danny. And I interrupted you, Tommy, as you were starting to tell us about scaling a
interrupters.
I totally screwed it up, I know, but obviously I'm not a pro at this. So tell us about the idea of scaling a service business and why that's so difficult.
Sure. So I think we were fortunate and unfortunate. I'd lean more towards fortunate of really early on, had a lot of inbound opportunities come our way. to grow the business. And so year 1 and year 2, we had the opportunity to scale and serve some really big brands. And I was young and stupid and naive, and still am, but more so then. And yeah, we just learned just the challenges that come with scaling a service business, that really we're in the people business, and getting people to collectively work together to produce outcomes for our clients. And so when you're bringing on a whole lot of business at once, you have to hire quickly to solve for that. And that's really hard. And yeah, we made some dumb decisions early on. And
were those dumb decisions more focused on who you were hiring, how fast they were being hired, or even who the client was? Were you taking the wrong client?
Probably all three. And I think looking back at it now, those are some of the like key principles that I now hold on, like how I do want to grow in the future, that we have to onboard clients that we know we can serve really, really well, and know who your client is and how you're going to serve them, and who's going to serve them. And from a hiring perspective, certainly, yeah, I mean, we hired too quickly, which means you don't go through the proper vetting process and really making sure that they're the perfect person for the role. And yeah, that was certainly some poor decisions early on.
So do you hire people that are coming from other agencies? I mean, you talked about that earlier, that you do hire some people from other agencies, but is that past experience in another agency a real critical factor for you? Or are you looking for something else that tells you, hey, this person's going to be successful in that?
I think agencies, nowadays, I try to hire people who do have some level of agency experience, even if it's for a couple of years. And the reason is because for those who don't, there's like a 6-month window, honestly, where you can figure out if they're built for this or they're not. That agencies, like I said at the beginning, I love it because you never get bored.
Mm-hmm.
There's a new challenge every single day. I go from selling college degrees to homes to laundry detergent to olive oil, all in 2 hours. Like it's really entertaining. On the flip side, it can be really overwhelming. That even outside of just like the time, your ability, like your brain, to switch from client to client, from a new audience that you're targeting, really quickly can be challenging. And so, yeah, people within the first 6 months can usually figure if they're going to stay in this for the rest of their life, or whether they should never do this again. And so, yeah, we try to hire from people who've had some experience in agencies before now.
So is ADD, ADHD a profile, like a positive profile for you guys?
I think so.
It must be.
So I'm kind of curious, you talked about kind of the trifecta of things that you learned. So what are you doing now differently? Like, so when you're in a scaling, what are the choices that you're making now, right? Stimulus response, back to your quote earlier, like how are you making different choices because of what you learned?
Sure. From a client perspective, it's being picky. We're an agency that's very retainer based, so it's not very campaign and project oriented. If we have a client, they're going to be a client for a long, long time, hopefully. The other challenge is that the thing that I mentioned earlier, that social is usually like handed to the least paid, least experienced person in the organization. The budgets on it are usually pretty insignificant, and so we have to come in, we have to prove ourselves, and then grow the accounts. And so we have to be really strategic about which accounts we onboard, because the reality is we probably aren't going to make money for the first 6 months on that account, maybe longer. That really it's going to be year 2 and 3 that the profits start to really show themselves. So being really strategic about the clients that we onboard, my biz dev guy has the worst job in the world because I just say no all the time. And then from a hiring perspective, experience, I'm young and I was naive to think that talent was the only thing that mattered early on. Idiot. Like, I mean, you start to realize that when you're in a fast growth type business, someone who can add value day one is really valuable. And so, yeah, we look for experience. And then from a culture perspective, I think that's really important. And we've tried to create one that doesn't operate like the traditional agency that burns you out and makes you work till midnight, and create something that people want to stay at long term.
So I noticed that your office is downtown Dallas in one of the big giant high-rise office buildings. What was it about being in downtown, the central business district, that you decided to do that? Was it a culture decision or?
Definitely. I think we're actually in a building where pretty much the vast majority of big ad agencies are in Dallas. It's all in like one building in downtown.
Really?
Oh, wow.
And so it's funny because when we do interviews, people usually just ride the elevator down.
Oh, wow.
And so
Going from one to the next?
Yep. And so definitely from a talent perspective. And then, yeah, I believe in downtown. I've lived there for 6 years now, and yeah, wanted to grow and thrive.
That's cool. I like that. I lived in downtown in 1984.
Awesome.
Long before it was cool to be down there. There was about 300 of us at the time, not counting the homeless folks. So what's the craziest product you've ever had to do a campaign for?
A presidential candidate would definitely.
U.S. presidential candidate?
Yes. So we took on that opportunity last cycle, and it was probably the most fun I've ever had in my life.
Do it again?
From the perspective of what's that?
Would you do it again?
Great question. Someone put it a really sick way, but I think it paints a good perspective. It's like campaigns are like drugs. Like in the moment, like they're the greatest thing in the world, but they'll ruin your life. So I think there's an element of being in a campaign that's just super fun, that it's fast paced, that you're changing positions every single day, not actual positions, but how you approach it. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a bit of a distraction, but it gave us the opportunity to say that we worked on a presidential campaign.
I would think it would be almost all-consuming. It'd be hard to have other clients during that period.
Definitely. I was pretty all in for about 9 months.
Wow.
And but it was a blast, and I learned so much. So
Do they pay well?
they pay well, because the reason is because really people who work in that business make money for about 6 to 12 months,
Right.
and then they don't have a ton of work until the next cycle.
Yeah. I didn't think
That's incredible to have that kind of a job where you're sort of dormant. But I guess you have to be networking and really involved in whichever party you're involved with.
Definitely.
Very carefully to strategize to put yourself in the right position.
For sure.
Interesting. Well, so why would people want to come work with your agency versus others?
Sure. I think part of it is kind of the element of if you go to big agencies right now, there's just a lot of challenges that exist in them with the client dynamic. But I think there's this other element that I've learned over just the last couple of years of interviewing people, that I was asked this interview question of what 3 promises could your next employer make you? And one of them almost always is trust, that people want to be given the opportunity to own something and not be micromanaged. And so I try to approach my management style that way, and our leadership team does as well. And when people are given ownership and trust, and they do have the experience and talent to actually go execute, it creates an environment where I think people really thrive.
Interesting. Well, so what are sort of the three big insights from having built and sold two companies and built a third company? What are big insights you would give to other entrepreneurs?
Sure. Despite how many business books I feel like I read in a given year, I never really expected cash flow to be as much of a problem as it was, especially in like a very fast growth business. So just like the first year and a half of Stripes was just like the most eye-opening experience that you can think like you are doing so well. Like all the contracts are getting signed, like you're closing business like crazy, but you're also onboarding a bunch of new expenses and employees really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And if your client's a big corporation paying on net 2 years, it feels like sometimes, it can be real challenging. I think from a sales perspective, making sure that you have big ownership over that so that you can create the vision that you want and set goals. So.
Well, thanks so much for being our guest with us today, Tommy. We've really enjoyed the time.
Thank you.
Please go to stripesagency.com to learn more. Learn more about the show, go to nextlevelshow.com or look us up on the internets at The Next Level Show, and you can find us on the podcast.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Spread the word.